That's my PSA for the night. And I will now turn this over to Therese to do the introductions.
All right. Yeah. So I've gone ahead and hit record. So we are recording this session so we can all view it later if we so desire. We are fortunate to welcome once again Steve from City Wine Market. So thanks so much for being here, and I'll let you take it away.
Well, beautiful. I'm sure everybody is quite happy that we're where we are and not out on the road driving to this tasting. So Zoom is once again proven itself quite useful in our lives. So today we're going to talk about two wines from the northwest corner of Italy, a region called Piedmont. So as you can see from the image behind me, this truly is the feet of the mountain. This is the foothills of the Italian Alps behind me. In fact, I don't know my geography well enough, but it's possible that some of those peaks behind us belong to Mont Blanc. That's generally where we would be here. But this is an area that has been planted to vine. Humans have existed with cultivated vine for about 500 years. It's the area behind me is a UNESCO World Heritage Site for this reason. Humans have been doing human things in this area for a long time, and that is really what makes Piedmont such a compelling region. There is so much history. There is so much beauty, natural and man-made. And this is it's a region that produces spectacular wine. It is an area that actually, if you're familiar with the international slow foods movement, essentially an organization dedicated to preserving the foodways and the traditions of cultures around the world. And Piedmont was actually the epicenter for this movement. I mean, the irony is that for them, kind of the farm to table movement is what they just call, dining. That's everything is sourced from within a very small area. Things are foraged from the forests around here. We're not too far from the ocean. Couple hours you'd be there, and so they have fresh fish. They have amazing produce. They are very famous here for truffles, both white and black. The white ones occur in the fall and are most prized. The black truffles occur year round and are also highly prized. But so this area just has so much to sell it. Again, natural beauty, great food, great wine. So as I said, this has been a wine growing region for hundreds of years, and much of that evolved the way most great old wine traditions evolved, where it wasn't so much of a thoughtful process as to how and where we plant the grapes. It really was just generations of trial and error, and then success, and then the perfection of that success. And so the grapes that grow here are ideally suited for this environment, particularly the ones that have grown up here. I mean, they could not be better suited. So the first wine that we're going to taste is kind of a reflection of this. It is a white blend, and it includes, which I would say in Piedmont, I actually didn't look up the percentages, but a much smaller percentage of wine is made as white, out of white varietals as is red. I would guess that in part is simply because red varietals, I mean, this is the region of Barolo and Barbaresco, two very, very prized Nebbiolo-based wines. And so I would assume if you were a grape grower and you had the opportunity to grow grapes that might produce a bottle that would sell for several hundreds of dollars, that would be an incentive to grow more red varietals. However, there are also restrictions. You can't grow all varietals in every place, or at least you cannot label them from that place. So the Piemontese are very much concerned about protecting their image, but I would say most concerned about protecting their image with respect to red wine. But this wine is from it's sort of confusing. So the producer on the bottle is Luigi Badana, and in 2009, Luigi's family has been growing grapes in this. I don't know where his farm is, but we may be looking at it. This is the hilltop. Let me see if I can slide out of the way. That is the hilltop village of Serralunga di Alba, and Luigi Bodana has been growing grapes. His family's been growing grapes and producing wine here for several generations. In 2009, he sold to a producer called Gidi Vira, a very, very well-known producer, mostly of Barolo red wines. But Luigi's property is like 6 acres. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny property. But it happens to sit in some really, really fine real estate, which is why Gidi Vira was interested in acquiring the estate. So the original producer is on the bottle, but this is actually a bottle produced today by Gidi Vira. So the blend on the wine, surprisingly, actually mostly Chardonnay. It is Chardonnay Sauvignon Blanc. There's a little Riesling in it, and there is a grape that's native to this area called Nacheta. And together, I mean, as you can see, from behind this village, this is definitely a cool climate region. So growing cool climate grapes that is what you're going to find. There are not a lot of very unctuous, say sloppy wines from this region, simply because the days are warm and mostly sunny, except for the fog that rolls in. But the nights are very cool. So the grapes spend a long time ripening and developing flavor, but while also retaining a lot of acidity. So the profile of the whites of this region are very in cooler regions. You get more development of fruit and floral notes. So on the nose, really pretty, kind of a peach and apple, white flowers, sort of a minerality to it. But a very, we would describe it as sort of high toned. They're not dense aromas. They're more breezy. They're a little pretty, I guess, that is really the best way of describing it. And that's largely in part due to this climate. The soil here is also, very prized, and as is actually the angle of the hill. When grapes have to struggle, they produce better wine. It seems funny, but you don't really want to give a grapevine everything it wants, just as much as it needs, and then let it fend for itself and kind of fight for what it gets. And so some of the best vineyard sites in this region are fairly steep because the water moves downhill and the grapes have to struggle. They have to send the roots deep into the ground to extract water and also and seek nutrients. So the hilliness of this area is also very influential in the wine. But as I said, the soil very complex. You've got clearly some geologic forces occurring just in the background, and so you find pretty well drained, gravelly soils. that again don't provide the vines a lot. They have to struggle and develop some complexity. So let's taste this this first white and see what you think. Yeah, very very classic of this region. I mean, your mouth is watering. You get citrus notes and herbal notes, and that, you know, in large part, the food of Piedmont really likes kind of these crisp counterpoints. They certainly love their rich food, but the wines often provide kind of an acidity to cut through that richness. I mean, one of their is truly brilliant. There's a pasta that is made in this area, and I apologize, I cannot remember its Italian name, but it basically translates to 40 yolk pasta. And the recipe is very simple. It's 2 kilos of flour and 40 egg yolks, and that's it. The egg yolk is the binder, and it takes on this beautiful yellow color, orange color, and is as rich a pasta as you could ever imagine. So if you were having that pasta, again, very, very rich pasta, you probably would want something that was a little brighter on the palate to kind of cleanse it, because you've now just ingested 40 yolks. And then also you would actually, I would say also, one of the classic pairings is shaved truffles on top of this. So 40 yolk pasta with shaved truffles. So you want something that's a counterpoint to that richness, that complexity. And I will say this, I've had this wine with mushroom risotto, and it is this particular wine is fantastic. I love high acid wines. So it's bright, it's crisp, it's clean, really, really nice fruit, like stone fruit and tree fruit flavors, and then that little floral note on the end. But really, just a pretty wine. This is a fairly new wine for us, and it's developed quite the following. Again, I think it has just a lot going on, and yet it's a very versatile, I mean, by itself. It's sort of unfortunate that we're dealing with the snow behind us, but because this is really, it's more of a glass of sunshine than it is an ice storm, but it is quite a nice wine. Any questions or thoughts on this?
Have you had the 40 yolk pasta? Just out of curiosity.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely spectacular.
It sounds amazing.
It is. The richness of it is just wonderful. They're really, in this area, a lot of the foods are fairly simple. Now granted, they're simple with spectacular ingredients. So their local cheeses are spectacular. They're foraging truffles from the surrounding forests. So, you know, a fairly typical pairing, you know, might be a fried egg with truffles on it, and that's your meal, and it's wonderful. But yeah, 40 yolk pasta is quite good. The other pasta that they do that's fairly popular in this area is called plin, Plin, and it is a mixture. You know, the Italians are always very very careful not to waste anything. So plin is basically a ground up mixture of pork, rabbit, with veal. I think those were the three things, and it's made into kind of almost a hash, and then that is placed in these tiny little purses that are then boiled and usually finished in a butter sauce or something like that. But plin, again, you know, really rich dish, but you have a wine that has good acidity and will and the reds often are characterized by fairly bright acidity as well. So that acid is going to cut through that richness and kind of lighten up the meal. But yeah, now this I love it's kind of a little breath of spring. I'm sorry it's not more like this outside.
Yeah, if anyone does have any tasting notes or wants to share what they are nibbling on alongside their wine, feel free to put it in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, foods, certainly, cheeses, risotto, they actually grow a lot of rice in around this region. In fact, there's a varietal of black rice that they grow that makes a really beautiful black risotto that's common to this area. But rice dishes, pasta dishes, certainly if you have some spare truffles, they're always welcome to the party. But roasted meats,
who has
simple
spare
foods.
truffles? I just wanted to know who might have spare truffles.
Yeah, well, I will make a plug for a good friend of mine's restaurant. A chef in Kansas City, Michael Smith, has an Italian restaurant called Farina. And if you are in the interest of having some black truffles, he has black truffles at the moment, but they are shipped directly from Alba, from a purveyor there. I was there a week or so ago, and he is offering fresh truffles, so you can get your beautiful veal chop or your some other house-made pastas that he does, and then he comes by and just rains truffles down on your plate. It's wonderful. But that with the wine is spectacular. Any wine with things that grow together go together. Definitely that rule works here very well. Well, shall we move on to the red?
I'll drink that to that.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for the red. It's a good red wine day. It's more of a red wine day for me.
Well, and I definitely encourage people to eat and drink seasonally. I think it just makes food taste better. And I think our body tends to appreciate the seasonality of foods more, whether we admit it or not. There's just something nice, and a rich glass of wine, red wine in the wintertime, is quite nice. I will say, however, this, as far as richness goes, this is really not, the richness in flavor, more so than richness in alcohol and extract. I mean, again, that cool region keeps the sugars down. So the grapes, while they spend longer ripening, they don't develop as much sugar, which then needs to be fermented into alcohol. So the wines of Piedmont typically are lighter in body and lighter in alcohol. They just don't. Part of that is traditionally they don't make boozy wines, but they also don't. Those boozy wines don't pair as well with their foods, so they will. In fact, even a lot of the regions will have limits on how much alcohol can actually be left in the wine. You can't make big sloppy wines and label them as from Barolo or even an area like Langhe, I would imagine is not allowed to exceed alcohol, certain alcohol levels. That's often common. But this wine is a grape called Dolcetto, and it's a confusing name. Dolcetto means little sweet one, and in no way is this wine sweet. I did some reading on it. There's really not there's not a good explanation that I've found, although probably one of the more plausible regions is Little Sweet One was basically what they referred to as these hills at the foothills of the mountains. So the Little Sweet Ones, where Dolcetto existed, may have been the motivator for the name. It was really more the place rather than the specific varietal. But Dolcetto obviously a red grape, not super high in acid, and not super high in tannin, which is why it actually does pretty well. I mean, if oftentimes Dolcetto in this region, Dolcetto is kind of treated as the house wine. So if you went into a restaurant and you ordered a glass of red, there's a good chance that it would be a Dolcetto. Might be Barbera. They drink a lot of Barbera in this area as well, and it's very versatile food wine. But Dolcetto is just the kind of the everyday, goes with lots and lots of different foods. But on the nose, again, a very pretty wine. Plums, cherries, purple flowers, some minerality to it. And again, I mean, a lot of the wines, and when we talk about minerality, it's sort of a vague term, but if you think about the smell of wet rocks or wet concrete, or sometimes even just like sea salt, that's what we're talking about, minerality. And where it's really derived, I can't say. I mean, there's so many. Grapes are absorbing things on an ionic level, so they're not really extracting everything as a whole out of the soil. But certainly there are places that in the world that have very complex, rocky, minerally soils that have wines that are also that way, that express those same things. So I like to believe it's a direct reflection of the terroir. In the past we've had realizations that things that were revealed about what we thought were the reasons for flavors and aromas that turned out to be wrong. But I believe that that it is a reflection of the terroir. But yeah, it's again, light plum, cherry, raspberry, like probably more red fruits than black fruits. Oftentimes wine can favor one fruit over the other, and that's certain. It's probably most connected to temperature and growing climate, where you get cherry and strawberry and raspberry in cooler regions, and you might get dark plum and blackberry and black currant in warmer regions. So this wine sort of skews toward the red side, a little lighter in body, certainly on the nose. But in the mouth, light, juicy. You get some kind of nice fine-grained, not real dry tannins, but just light, fine-grained tannin. You do have some dryness there. But this again, as a food wine, these are all things that you want. It's something that is going to work well with a lot of other things rather than compete with it or overtake it. Some wines are just so heavy that they really do overpower the food. It's like boxing. You want the match to go on as long as possible, so you don't have a heavyweight against a featherweight. And that's really kind of the way you think you want to think about food. But this is very nice, kind of middle of the road body and acidity. It's from a great producer. Fontana Freda has been around for since the 1800s, and they farm roughly 250 acres, so much larger property than the first one. This wine is sourced from, so the area that it is, it's hard to explain. Dolcetto DOC is a large region that covers a lot of smaller ones, because Dolcetto is not the premier varietal. It gets kind of second billing. So this wine just has a Dolcetto DOC label on it, but the fruit from this wine, I mean, some of the fruit comes from Serralunga, the village behind me, and other comune in the surrounding area, and then they are all blended together. But this is a great expression of Dolcetto and just kind of that everyday table wine. Any questions or thoughts on that guy?
when I get together with my sister, we often will have a red wine, kind of like a lighter bodied, maybe similar to this one, a lighter bodied red wine we make popcorn with Parmesan, and that's one of our
Yeah,
favorite wine snacks. And I feel like this would be good with that.
absolutely. Yeah. No, popcorn with parm is and black pepper. That
Oh,
is
yeah.
with actually with champagne, it's phenomenal. That's a wonderful pairing. But yeah, it is. This region is again close enough to the ocean that you might have fresh fish, and so having a wine that can go with your 40 oak pasta, as well as your truffles, as well as some fresh fish, as well as pork and lamb and other things that they're raising around here. That's very important. I mean, they're very much into eating, farm to table. So their wines need to be able to pair with the foods that they're consuming, because that's just, I mean, Italy is really that way. I mean, particularly when you look at the food and wine cultures, I mean, they're very localized. The people that make up one region will really define those foodways, and they may be complete. I mean, they're often completely different from regions just neighboring or within an hour's drive. They're just that's not what they do. So the wines of Piedmont are really fairly versatile. I mean, Nebbiolo I probably wouldn't have with like poached whitefish. It's a fairly tannic, big red wine. They have the chemistry to age for decades. But this kind of Goldilocks profile is very versatile through a lot of foods, and that's kind of its magic.
Both of these are really, I have to tell you, with my pasta, both of these are really excellent with pasta. And I don't make a 40 yolk pasta, but my pasta is a cup of flour and 2 eggs. So
Yeah.
it's kind of in that same, it's a little heavy on the egg, and it's pretty simple, and it really is nice with both of these wines. Are really great with it. So
And that's that kind of that good acidity, complementary flavors. They're not going to overpower. They're going to work nicely and play well together. Yeah, I mean, in this, I mean, actually, it's even in this area. I mean, the oh gosh, it just flew out of my mind. Oh well, another dish that I was thinking of. But yeah, the use of, I mean, using egg yolk as a sauce for your pasta. I mean, it really there's a lot of use of fairly simple ingredients that are where the flavors, you don't have to do a lot to the pasta itself if you pair it with the wine, because now more is going on, and you notice more things. But yeah, I love the foods of this area. This is truly a kind of a gastronomic center. Certainly for Europe. I mean, most definitely for Europe. This area is, and certainly for Italy. But I would say it even expands beyond that. What they've done here. So
Let's see, someone commented that they're having grissini and hazelnuts. And then someone else asked about carbonara.
that's okay. Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to think of. Egg yolk
Ah,
pasta. Yeah. Yes,
that's the
carbonara.
nickname.
No,
Okay.
that is, yeah. So, yeah, pancetta and egg yolk. That's all you really need. Little garlic. I mean, but you can, yeah, carbonara. That is it just, again, simple ingredients if they're really good. And I mean, I've had just the fried egg with truffles on it. The egg, had the yolk was so golden it was blinding, and it just whatever they were, whatever this chicken was experiencing was working well for it. It was truly a happy chicken. But no, hazelnuts, yeah, that's the forests around here. They really provide a lot. I mean, a lot. I mean, they hunt in the forests, they forage. The forests protect the vineyards from wind and things, provide wind blocks. I mean, this is really a very special environment. But yeah, the hazelnuts. It's funny. I made the mistake when I was there of commenting that the chocolate hazelnut spread Nutella, this was like Nutella, and the person sort of rolled their eyes. Apparently, they are very proud of the chocolate hazelnut spread that is made in this area. They're not as proud of Nutella. I think their comment was, we don't grow enough hazelnuts to provide the world with all of the Nutella that they consume, which makes you think, okay. But yeah, the hazelnut gets incorporated into a lot of things. And actually, as a lot of some of their white wines, as they age, you actually taste very distinctive hazelnut flavors in the wine. So, it's kind of, again, I don't know, why that happens, but I like to believe that that too is terroir. I mean, for the same reason you get almost notes of truffle in some of, if you drink an old Barolo, and you can almost smell truffles in the background, and the Barolo is probably just asking for truffles, and I don't know, maybe that's what's going on, but they're certainly, there's a lot of affinity. The wines will often show and have an affinity for the things that grow in the area, if you look closely, and that's pretty cool. I mean, actually both chocolate and hazelnut can show up in some of the red wines. It's not so much Nutella as it is just like light cocoa and the nuttiness. But this is such. I mean, there's so many good things to eat in this area. It's hard to have a bad meal. Really hard.
There's a couple more questions in the chat. Two questions from the same person, but the wine variety, is the wine variety age worthy like Nebbiolo? And also, why is this less expensive than Nebbiolo?
Okay. Good question. Two things. One, no, for the most part, Dolcetto has a fairly short term life. It really is designed to be the wine. I mean, if you were drinking Nebbiolo, there's some areas, and this the first wine that we had, it's coming from several regions, which is why it has to kind of fall back on a larger geographic designation, Langhe, Langhe. Langhe is a fairly large region, and they're sourcing grapes from many areas in Langhe for that white. But they also grow Nebbiolo in Langhe, and Langhe Nebbiolo is delicious. It has many of the characteristics of Barolo, which is 100% Nebbiolo, but it's not as tight. It's not as tannic. The commune of Barolo produces some of the greatest wine on the planet, and it has a chemistry that will age for decades. Well, if you're living in Piedmont, you don't really want to have to, plan your next glass of wine for a decade from now. So there are wines that are designed to kind of fill in the gaps. And Dolcetto is one of those. Barbera is another one. They are much better suited for for near-term consumption. But yeah, in fact, I would say probably Barbera might have even a longer life than Dolcetto. Maybe wrong. Nah, I would guess that on average, Barbera would outshine Dolcetto. But still, both of these are fairly near-term consumption wines. Why is it less expensive? Simply because it doesn't age. It doesn't have the pedigree that Barolo has. The chemistry, I mean, the region of Barolo has just this, it's just this area that the nature makes the wine. The grapes are very small berries, very thick skin. Like you have lots of skin and not as much juice because the grapes do have to struggle to find water, and so you get these wines that have a chemistry that will endure for decades. I mean, you can pour a bottle of wine, a Barolo that's 20 years old, and it still tastes like fruit. I mean, it has many other complex flavors, but it still remembers that it's Barolo, that it's Nebbiolo. So if you have a wine like that, and part what you're buying is the possibility of holding on to it for that long. So there's certain wines that just, unfortunately, the varietal will dictate what the price is. And I mean, as an example, in the region of Napa Valley, certainly Cabernet is their shining star, but that doesn't mean that everybody makes great Cabernet in Napa Valley. Some do, some make sort of average Cabernet, but it'll always get more because it's Cabernet from Napa Valley. Before that's even tasted, that will get a premium. And but I think in the case of Dolcetto, it really is. It's just its role is not to be the lead. It's a supporting cast member. It's there for, it's not going to show up on Friday and Saturday night or even Sunday dinner, but Tuesday night, Wednesday night, it's going to be fantastic. And that's Barolo. It's not Nebbiolo, but I mean, that's Dolcetto rather. It's not Nebbiolo. It's a little more versatile. But hopefully that answered the question. That was sort of a rambling answer, but I apologize.
Looks like that answered it. Yeah. Let's see. We've got another question here. This is a 2019. So what is the optimum age for this wine?
For the most part, I mean, I've actually had this wine about 6 months ago, and I would say it's actually more expressive now than it was 6 months ago. But for the most part, wines today, and it's not even I wouldn't even say it's unique to, I mean, it's not unique to Piedmont. This would be true everywhere. Wines, there are techniques that have occurred in advancement in winemaking, advancement in viticulture, in the growing of grapes, that have made it possible to make wine that is ready sooner, or maybe more ready sooner. So for the most part, when a wine shows up on a shelf, the winemaker has determined that it is ready to drink. And that's not always been the case. Certainly when I started selling wine 20 some years ago, if you were buying, say, Bordeaux, you pretty much knew that if you were buying Bordeaux, and actually maybe even 30 years, Bordeaux in the 90s, let's say, if you were buying Bordeaux in the 90s, you knew that you probably needed to buy it when it was released, because that would give you the least expensive cost. And then you would probably need to sit on it, put it into a cool, dark spot for 5, maybe 10 years before it was really ready. And kind of part of that was due to the fact that the way the grapes were being managed on the vine meant that they were less ripe going into the wine. And then there's this crazy tool, and it kind of takes away some of the magic. But probably one of the most significant advancements in winemaking that I have seen comes from this piece of machinery called the optical sorter. And it basically is a machine that uses a computer to analyze the color spectrum of every grape that passes by. And if that color spectrum does not match the phenolic ripeness that the winery is looking for, a little puff of air shoots that grape off to the side. So, and this is being used all over the world. It's really changed the way wines age, because if you're now able to remove underripe grapes, and they may not even be like visibly underripe, but something that a computer can determine is underripe. If you don't have that underripe, you don't have to wait for it to mellow out. And so a lot of wines today really, some will age, but most of them, by the time they show up on the shelf, they're ready to drink. And you'll know if it's not, you know, the wine maybe is very tight. You're just not smelling or tasting much. You know, give it a month or two and see what happens. But for the most part, they're ready once they hit the shelf.
All right. We've got another question here from Scott. Just a history question. You said at the outset that they have been making wine here for 500 years. Before then, even back to the Romans or even the Celts, weren't they making some sort of wine?
Yes. Wine did predate Roman era. Cultivated wine predated that. I mean, for example, in northern Spain, wine had been made by the time the Romans got to northern Spain. Wine had been made there for about 300 years. So it is the cultivated vine. I mean, this is you know, it started in the Mediterranean. Well, actually, originally the grapes came from around the Black Sea, but they moved very quickly through this area, and northern Italy really did become sort of a pinch point for a lot of these grapes. I mean, if you're looking at those mountains behind us, behind me, you would want to find areas that were not that were more passable than others, and so you saw these grapes kind of find the valleys that led northward. But yeah, this area really is a piece of human history, and the winemaking that exists here hasn't really changed much. There are a lot of the facilities are still in medieval buildings, and using very old equipment. So yeah, very historic area.
Let's see. Someone else asks, dare I ask what they do with the rejected grapes in the optimal slitter?
Yes. Yeah. So basically, if the grapes, now normally when the grapes are harvested, all of the grapes in this area are harvested by hand. It would actually be impossible to get harvesting equipment, tractors and things in these vineyards. Number one, they wouldn't want them there because a tractor is going to compact the soil and maybe even change the way the water drains. So, but even if they were capable of doing that, they would not want the tractors in this area. But it is so everything is harvested by hand, and the vineyard workers that are doing this are going to be very selective. They're looking for perfectly ripe bunches. So the grapes that show up, it's not, I mean, I guess it's possible that a grape would end up green. You know, maybe it was shaded, but probably that got knocked off before. The grapes that are being rejected by the optical sorter are still going to be good quality. They're just not going to be the quality that a region like this is looking for, or the winery is looking for. So basically what happens is if they're really green, it probably goes right back out to the vineyard where it becomes mulch. And there's a lot of composting in winemaking. There's, you know, you have a lot of byproduct. I mean, in fact, like I said before, the Italians are very good at making use of everything. Nothing. There are no scraps. And in the region of Piedmont, one of their very popular beverages in this area is called grappa, And grappa is when the grapes, after they've been crushed, you get this kind of black goop called pumice. And the Italians realized that if you put that into a really hard press and you extract the last remaining juice out of that, you can distill it into a spirit, an eau de vie, a water of life, clear distillate, very high proof, that is often enjoyed after dinner and things like that. So they would not even let the pumice go to waste. But yeah, no, in the case of the optical sorter, probably if they were really green, they would just go back out to the vineyard as compost. But if they were still usable, they just didn't have the ripeness level that the winery is looking for, it would be still pressed, but the juice would be sold off to someone else who would then make something with it. You wouldn't be able to label it as a wine from, say, Serralunga di Alba, or even you might not even be able to label it Piedmont, although you could probably still label it. You would have to declassify it to a very generic description, and the winery would not want its name connected to it. But yeah, they would not. It would get used. They would find some use for it, certainly.
Are those the optical sorters, or is that pretty much used universally now, or?
I've seen them. Yes, I've seen them all over the world. It sounds very high tech, but it was a technology. I would guess it's been around at least 10 years. It's been a while. They're not inexpensive. They do cost a lot, but if you're making, bottles that retail for hundreds of dollars per bottle, you can justify a lot when that's the case. But a lot of these, so if even for many of the wines in this area are made in actually fairly small quantities. So having human sorting, I would imagine many of the producers here, outside of the top tier producers of Barolo, where their wines, again, they want them to have the chemistry and be just so perfect that 20, 30, 50 years later, their wines are still drinking well. They're going to be the ones to invest in that kind of technology. Many of the smaller wineries really are fairly, they're still using, they use human labor in the vineyards. They sort, but they're not going through so much volume that they can't be selective in their own. Optical sorters are really useful where you're sorting just tons and tons and tons of grapes at once, and you need to maintain quality. These are, in many cases, I would imagine certainly in this area, smaller producers are still doing everything the old-fashioned way, but they're able to maintain quality because they're not making a ton of wine. The throughput is fairly minimal. Hopefully that answered it. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. This is also just sort of a general question, but I recently saw in the store a wine bottle. It was a sparkling wine that said 0 on it. And at first I thought it was 0 alcohol, but that wasn't the case. It was 0 sugar added. What is that what is the story with that? Like, is that something, a new distinction that people are putting on their bottles, or what's, I wasn't sure what to make.
Well, so there's been unfortunately there's kind of some marketing these days is fairly misleading. Many wine regions don't actually even allow sugar to be added. It's not an option. The better wine growing regions believe that if the vines have been grown properly, they have the sugar they need. So that's called chaptalization. And so chaptalizing wine in many of the best regions is actually illegal. But it is, there are a number of wine projects that are touting things that are only, it's not that they're wrong, it's that there's a lot more to it than what they're explaining. I mean, there's a project called Dry Farmed, or Dry Farm, something like that. And the indication is, well, dry farming makes healthier wine. It doesn't. It makes it's, I would argue it's probably better for the planet, because dry farming means you're not irrigating. But the quality of the wine is not different because it's dry farmed. And the zero sugar, the reality is, a lot of wine, and in kind of the not the bulk world, but a lot of mass produced wine is chaptalized. In fact, sugar is probably the most benign thing that are added to some of the larger projects. I mean, to get there, you can add powdered tannin. The worst is powdered oak, which most people call sawdust, but that's what it is. Instead of investing in oak barrels, the winery will essentially stir in and then filter out wood to give it that woodiness. So there are a lot of wines that truly are very sweet, but they were made that way by humans, and it's zero. Yeah, the zero sugar added is, that's a good thing, but it's not a rare thing in many of the quality wine regions. It's just not, you just don't add sugar. There's too much at stake. There's pride here. I mean, this is a region that's been producing the same wine for 500 years. They would not allow it to change. The laws won't allow it to change. They want to protect that brand. But yeah, there has been, and I think the good thing is, I think we'll end up seeing this debate kind of dealt with, because people will say, well, I would like some wine that has less sugar. And then you say, well, actually, if you go to a region like Piedmont, nature will curtail the development of sugar. It's not so warm that the grape is developing fermentable sugars. And if the grape develops fermentable sugars, they have to do something with it. So they have to ferment it or remove it or leave it in. And it usually is either fermented or just left in. And left in is the easiest thing to do. So I think when people are looking for lower alcohol or lower sugar wines, there are wine regions that nature is doing that work. So, you don't need something that's been chemically adjusted or manipulated to get to what you're looking for. You just have to source it from the right region. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Again, the trend is good. Lower alcohol, lighter styles, more complementary to food, less kind of clumsy and sloppy. We had a time when wines were just, and it was like you were drinking port, and the wines were so full-bodied and heavy. And there's not a lot of food that we eat that really likes that. And so that may be in part kind of the pushback against sugar. But yeah, I'm not the no added sugar thing. I'm sort of out on that one at the moment.
Gotcha. Okay. So, well, that's good to have that cleared up, because I mean, I was hoping that most other wines that I would buy didn't have added sugar, but maybe that's a bit of a
I mean it. Well, it kind of is. The irony is, Chardonnay, one of the most popular white wines, is actually one of the sweetest wines on the shelf. And that's surprising to some, but we don't, Chardonnay will often be very oaky and buttery, or it can be oaky and buttery, and those two aromas mask what we think of as sweet. I mean, people talk about, well, that we all know when somebody says, hey, that smells sweet, we know what they're saying. But the funny thing is there is no smell of sweetness. Sugar has no smell. White sugar smells like the bowl it's in. And certain things have sweetness that we associate. And so because my theory is because Chardonnay, oak and butter don't conjure up immediately, jammy, syrupy, brulee, creamy, rich ripeness, that it's able to mask a lot of the sugar. But yeah, Chardonnay, if you look at the tech sheets, the chemical analyses of the wine, you can find that some Chardonnay has twice the sugar of the average Riesling, and Riesling smells sweet, and may not be, and Chardonnay doesn't smell sweet and can be crazy sweet. So it's funny how sugar can kind of go incognito in certain wines.
Yeah. Well, should we discuss next month's?
Absolutely.
We're coming to a close here. I think last meeting we had talked about doing comparing Rhones from different regions. Is that something you still
like
think?
Rhone style wines from different regions? Yeah.
Cool.
I think that would be fun. In fact, there are a couple that I very much like that I've had recently from California that really California has been pursuing that in fact there's even a winemaker that was referred to in the 90s as the Rhone Ranger from California, but some of those wines really have gotten to the point of being just perfect knockoffs of Châteauneuf-du-Pape or something from the Southern Rhone. So yeah, I would love to do that. That'd be great.
Okay.
Now, do you want to do 2 reds instead of a white and a red? I mean, we could try both, but maybe a side by side red to red would be
be fun,
more revealing.
Yeah, huh? I think I'm seeing some nods. So yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Let's do it.
Okay. Yeah, let's do. I will we'll do 2 reds. Oh, go ahead.
There is one more question, and I think Larry probably needs to unmute and ask it, but I'll tell you what he wrote here. Perhaps we need a session on what really happens in wine production around the world. And I'm not exactly sure what that question means, but maybe he can unmute and we can find out, because that might be something of interest.
We could absolutely. No, I mean, the question is, do you really want to know? I mean, I mean, there is a lot that the wine industry has no reason to feel embarrassed about. There's some other things that kind of, are more interesting. But I would say, for the most part, good wine from good regions was made in a good way, however that is. But yeah, we could absolutely talk about the process of winemaking in the modern age. It's certainly changed in my career. So we can talk about that.
That might be a good session.
The darker side of wine.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the science has done many great things. I mean, the optical sorter as an example, but it's also revealed other things that, this is sort of a shortcut, and how many people will really know? Chemical engineering has advanced as well during the history of wine, and there are a lot of engineers working these days. They're doing some interesting things. So yeah, we could absolutely talk about kind of the other side of winemaking.
As the evening, I will be the official timekeeper, and we're starting to run out of time. So obviously want to thank Steve again. Remind everybody March 16th is our next Wine Around the World. And you will be all receiving your March reminders for all of our activities. One other thing that I would like to mention is I've tried to go a little farther out in the calendar. So for those of you who like to plan ahead and you go to lplks.org, you can look at activities that are all the way out in the spring and even early summer and start registering for those in advance if you want to jump into places where there might be minimum amount of registration allowed. Other than that, I think we should all thank Steve again and Therese for a wonderful job.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. And thanks everyone for being here. We'll see you all next month. if
All
not
righty.
sooner.
Fantastic. Be well. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks a
Bye.
bunch.